Hello, my name is Lucy Lynch and I'm Head of Education at Eden Smith Group. I'm delighted to announce the beginning of my podcast series, which is entitled The Future of Work. I've been really curious to hear from different voices in our community, some people just starting out in their career, and others that are founders of companies. What I found most remarkable about doing this podcast series is that there are common strands which delight me, which are about creativity and curiosity and commitment, and a real emphasis on soft skills and how so important they are, twinned with our technical abilities.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. So I'm Aurélie, I'm 19. I'm a university student entering my second year at St. Andrews, and I'm studying English and film studies, and also dipping my toes into archival research and the sort of entrepreneurial ecosystem that exists at my university.
Amazing, amazing. And currently you're in Paris now, so I know that you're bilingual. You kind of grew up with a French and English kind of like background, which is great. And I know that, you know, from talking to you before, that you've got a really sort of like curious sort of nature, and you'd like to, like, you're doing like your research papers. And what is it that kind of like inspires you? What kind of piques your interest, like subjects and topics?
Well, I think ever since I really started getting interested in what I could create and produce, it's always about like telling stories. Ever since I did there was a roaming schoolhouse system since I did high school and middle school in France. We had this like prep school to pass the exams to get in there. And so where we did a lot of creative writing and putting on plays. And ever since I could start like sort of writing stories, that's something that I felt like I really wanted to stay into. And I've kind of kept that storytelling aspect in everything that I've pursued. And I think what's been so great about university is I've realized the different forms that can take. And that's why I've really been enjoying kind of delving into research a bit more and doing projects in teams where it might not necessarily be my story, but we're linking different stories that exist or shining a light on stories that have been forgotten or have not received, the proper sort of that not been a light hasn't been shown on them like the way that could have been. I guess that's what I've been really interested in.
Okay, amazing. And I saw that you in 2017 that you got first place in the Young Authors Fiction Festival, and you'd submitted a story. Tell me a little bit about that.
So that was I discovered what YAF is, which is the Young Authors Fiction Festival, through my teachers in my middle school and high school, and I had been writing a lot of short stories just for fun on the side, and then I thought I'd really go for it and write something like, I don't know, out of my comfort zone, experiment. And I didn't expect to win whatsoever, because I'd written a bit of a disturbing story and I was like 12, 13, and I didn't really know if that's like, I didn't really know what was expected of you. And then to hear the feedback when they gave the awards, where I don't know, kind of getting such positive feedback about doing something that I felt like, oh, I'm not maybe doing what's expected of me to like get a good grade, for example. That was really inspiring, of seeing like, okay, I can kind of just like create what I want to create and kind of see where that then takes me. I thought that was probably the best thing that I learned from that experience.
Wow. So from that conversation, that the kind of vibe that I'm getting is that, you know, you're not a person that's kind of grown up in this world that's trying to fit into a particular stereotype or norm. You're just kind of going with your creativity and letting that steer you wherever that could be, and not looking at stereotypical norms and thinking, right, I need to write this because that's what's going to be expected of a 12, 13-year-old. So I think that tells an amazing story of, and fills me with such positivity and hope, because the way I see for the future future, I think, well, you know, what could it look like? How is it going to feel? How are we all going to work together? How are we going to, you know, reside together in a hopefully a fairly, you know, harmonious kind of like life. And what I really liked about what you're saying is that you're not going with the norm, and you're just going with your gut and going with your creativity and letting that steer you, which I think is, you know, tremendous. Because when I think about the world and technology, for example, you know, because that's the world that I work in, I think about how we're going to find solutions for things, for problems and world problems and massive, like large scale, you know, conundrums that you think, you know, some scientist locked away in an ivory tower is going to fix, and it's going to go, ta-da, here's the solution. But actually, it doesn't actually have to be like that. And it could be that we're creating the next generation of people that are going to be living, you know, the future, but they're actually doing it in a really clever way, because they're actually going with their creativity first, which I think is highly significant and really important. So when you're talking about stories, can I just ask, and this is a bit of on the spot, what's your favorite, or what was your favorite story growing up as a child? Is it something that I would know, or maybe not?
Well, when I was young, I really enjoyed Roald Dahl, and like the Tales of the Unexpected. I really liked, and I enjoyed how like weird it was. And then in terms of like movies, my favorite movie as a child was always Bridge to Terabithia, which is you know, not the most positive movie, but it was genuinely, I can like rewatching it during confinement, and I hadn't seen it in years, but I realized I had watched it so much as a kid that I could remember like the specific sounds, like when he's like drawing on his like shoe, or like just the specific sounds and images that happen in the movie just completely you know, like left an impact. So I just think like, I don't know, kind of like Strange Worlds are like a mix of real and imaginary, but you can't quite tell like the line between the two. I've always really enjoyed. So I think that those were kind of my favorite types of stories. So I don't know if you meant like really like childhood, like kids.
No, that's okay. That's absolutely fine. That's absolutely fine. And with that, when we talk about, you know, that kind of like the strange worlds, like kind of surreal worlds, and what's real and what's not, when you think about the future, because my version of the future, like I remember watching like Blade Runner, like years and years ago when I was a teenager, and thinking, oh my God, this is like, love Ridley Scott films, and I was just like blown away, right? And that was the future when I was a teenager. And what is your, you know, kind of view of how the world might look in the future for you?
Well, I guess to kind of bounce back on what you were talking about before about you know, sort of how do you make a difference? Is this sort of like scientist in a room, or just like going with your gut? The way I see it is it's gonna, I feel like for a long time we've felt like you know, that there's been this kind of wave of like, you need to master technology and understand that because that's the future. And now with kind of the revolution with AI, there's this, I think this, especially when you see the strikes going on in the like film industry because of the talk of having scripts written by AI or sets written that are created by AI. I think we've kind of decided, at least, like, I think I feel like we've kind of decided as a society that like that's not possible, that there's no, like, we're missing something there, that like a set that's created by AI, we're always going to have something that's familiar, that you're not going to feel like you're innovating. I feel like that's the conclusion that we've come to. And so I feel like the lines between technology and creation are being blurred more. I don't know if we're quite there yet, but I see that as kind of being the kind of final outcome. Because at least in France, all my friends that are French are doing sciences. And then when I went to St. Andrews, all my friends that are close to me now are like doing humanities. And then when I hear them like the ones that do sciences, their motivations are not that different at all from those doing humanities or more like creative disciplines. And they are also just my like friends doing maths and physics are also don't really know where that's going to lead them, but are following their gut because this is what interests them, this is what they're good at, and they feel like that's what they need to follow. And then just generally, I think with social media, we kind of have to both be able to be creative, sort of know how to create aesthetics as a new form of like communicating, but then also need to have a basic understanding of technology to be able to continue that communication. So I just think that blurring of lines of what's like humanities and sciences just kind of not being so separated. That's kind of how I see it.
And did you say, or did I misunderstand that what you're saying about, you know, using AI would make you feel that you're not innovating because you're utilizing technology, whereas you would have maybe, you know, reached a different conclusion if you weren't not relying but utilizing AI? Is there a thing there or not?
I don't think that you're not like creating or not innovating if you use AI. Like that's not what I mean to say, because I mean obviously like let me think of how to like explain this. Like even if I do digital art, so I like use Procreate, that's using AI, but it's just a new like medium, and I had so much fun with it because I feel like, okay, now I get to experiment and try a whole host of different things like visually that I couldn't have done. And then for example like animation or I mean video games, that's obviously like you have to, I don't think, I'm not saying that using technology is not creative, but I think that we have this, I think what the strikes in the cinema world show is that like we can't solely depend on it. Like we can't just ask it to create a set and then a script and then characters. Like we need that, like we need that sort of human like a human component, that it needs to be like a tool and not a replacement. And so that's what I mean in kind of like sciences and the like creative world kind of like blending together, is that like they're complementary tools and interdisciplinary tools and not separate disciplines. I think that's what I mean to say.
Okay, no, that's great. And definitely I was talking to somebody a few weeks ago, and I'm very much of the opinion that, you know, that technology should enhance our experience in the world as citizens, right? But also when we think about technology as well, I'm also a big advocate for hoping that, you know, there are systems set in place that everybody can access technology as well to enhance their experience in the world, because that's another kind of bias thing. If you're, you know, in a certain socioeconomic background, you might not be able to access things. And that if I was to say, you know, I'm going to ask you in a second, you know, what keeps you up at night, what keeps me up at night, definitely is that I worry that you know, that the playing field is not clear, you know, is not open for everybody to access. And when I think of smart cities and all these things that I'm deeply passionate about and very, very interested in, but it's very much about from a citizen perspective, from, you know, from an elderly perspective, from a disabled perspective, how is everybody that lives in our world, you know, going to be able to access smart technology and things if they don't have Wi-Fi, or if they don't have a smartphone, or they can't scan a QR code? Like how does that all work? You know, I was in a park in central London the other day, and there was a new splash pool like for kids. It's in one of the poorest boroughs in London, and you could only access it if you could, you know, scan a QR code, go on to the website, do all these things. And I just thought of, well, that's great if you've got access to those things, but if you don't, what are you going to do? And I just felt there's another also generation of kids growing up in the world where they don't have that possibility to access, like obviously in the UK, but also worldwide. So what do we do about that? So they're questions that keep me up at night. But what about you? What keeps you up at night? like worrying about stuff? I mean, obviously I don't want you to be worrying about stuff and not sleeping, because you need to sleep to have a good mental well-being, but if you did, what does that look like to you?
Well, first, I just want to like echo what you were talking about, and that it just reminded me of that Ken Loach movie, My Name is Daniel Blake, where it's like all about that. That was a deeply troubling movie.
Very, very troubling. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I cried so much.
Oh yeah, no, that was horrible. I guess it kind of links to, I guess, what keeps me up at night, or the kind of conversations I always end up having with my friends, which I feel like for me, what troubles me, and I think is kind of like what I personally feel is kind of the cause of technology or AI, all these things kind of going in a direction that's not inclusive or not looking to, empower people as a whole, is kind of what we were talking about the first time that we met, where we were talking about ambition, and kind of our objectives, or what we think should be our objectives as individuals, and then as as companies, or like, I feel like we have a big misconception of like what that means or where that's supposed to lead, and we have this kind of we go about life with this like final objective of success that's really kind of not realistic, or not actually fulfilling, and it was also just not really achievable. And I find that our ways of conceiving ambition is completely defined by numbers. And I was talking with a math student at my university, where we were having this conversation, and I was complaining about, like from when you start in the education system, like your level of success is defined by grades, by numbers, like that constantly from preschool, middle school, high school. Then you get your final grade that determines where you can go to university, and then still you continue to have grades, and then that is translated on social media, obviously, with this. I mean, I'm not saying anything groundbreaking, but with likes and followers and such, and then with money, that's such a, like, all these numbers, how much you're supposed to make, how many likes you're supposed to get, what grades you're supposed to get, like everything is numbers. And we are having this chat with this math student. She told me, like, yeah, like numbers are great, but they can't like translate empathy. And I thought that was like such a like aha moment when she explained that, because I think that's our issue, is we've defined success in a language that can't express empathy. And I think that leads everything to kind of, as a consequence, be a little bit corrupted by it. That's kind of what keeps me up at night.
Yeah. And I think completely that's completely bang on. So yeah, definitely empathy. I've read and I've posted before on different platforms about empathy being one of the number one skills that we need to have in our boardrooms, in our teams. We need to be building our teams where people can empathize and see another person's side of the street, rather than just looking at what's in front of us, what's ahead of us, and how is that going to affect our bottom line. So that's a great kind of shout out. And when we think about, if we're talking about work, and we're thinking about jobs and companies and ideals, so that leads me nicely onto one of my questions I wanted to ask you, was that obviously Eden Smith, like we're obviously part of a staffing business, and we deal with job descriptions, like hundreds of them every day, every month. And I wonder, from your perspective, what does a good job description look like? How does that sing to you if you see a job that's advertised? Or would you see a job that was advertised on a job description? Do you think they're an outdated form? Do you think there's a different way to communicate with your generation, and it's not just about having a piece of paper that says X, Y, and Z, and still a lot of companies don't even put the start salary, so you don't even know where to pitch yourself, which is horrendous in 2023, that not all companies do that, because they absolutely should. And I just wonder, like, what do you think about that?
Well, as I'm just like starting to get in the world of reading job descriptions and seeing, okay, I want to apply for that, or I don't want to apply for that. The ones that I think I really enjoy, the ones that say like, when they explain like essential skills, not necessary skills, but you know, would be nice to have. And they
Yeah.
kind of put it like a you know, a description of sort of what sort of person might be interested in the role, and sort of what sort of personality makeup or makeup of skills they need to have. I think that's always useful. But I think personally the jobs that I see and I'm like, yes, this is like absolutely for me, are the ones where I can tell they're going to kind of give you the leeway to be innovative, to, you know, kind of give you an objective, but then give you the room to present maybe solutions to problems that they might not even know they had. I always find that really exciting when there's descriptions about that. Always when there's any sort of hint towards creation, I jump on that, whether that's like marketing, storytelling, visual, creative, like anything at all. Like I always jump on that. But I think when you can tell that there's going to be this sort of, you know, room to actually be able to present something that you feel like is worth something, and is not, I actually think the less strict description there is of the job, maybe the more exciting it is, because you feel like you might be able to kind of make it your own thing. I don't know if that makes like complete sense, because I'm still trying to understand what that world is. But then obviously like in research, which is something that I'm trying to like as much as I can get into at university, in terms of job wise, I feel like that's a place where you kind of get that more of that space, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, the whole thing of creativity, so that's something that I've been, you know, I feel, you know, myself personally, that I love being creative and, you know, draw and paint and write and, you know, play the piano. And but also it's like, so if I didn't have some creativity in my life, I'd go, oh my God, what am I doing? Right. You know, it's like, just want to be part of that. And obviously I work in the data science world and IoT, but I'm always talking about the arts and saying that technical students should absolutely go to the art galleries, go to the theatre, absorb themselves in, you know, like stuff that is just out there, to be absorbed and stuff, because I always say that will make your technical work absolutely more compelling and more creative, because you're absorbing some richness that you're not just going to get from a textbook. And a long time ago, I worked in a telecoms company where it was probably, well, I don't know, 12, 15 years ago. And they had a creativity room. Now, at the time, it was like revolutionary. There was like, you had to take your shoes off and you go in and it was like all white. It was almost like everybody was wearing white and everyone was looking like they worked in Muji, and it was all very free flowing and amazing, but and very zen. I loved it. And it was all just like whiteboards, and they just had all these marker pens and they could just draw and just, you know, work out, you know, stuff to do with telecoms. I don't really know, but it was a really kind of fun place, a bit like a childhood, you know, thing where you could just go and write on the walls, and it was like, oh, I quite like this. And now, as I'm older, I think when I think of creativity and finding solutions to things, actually, you know, and also, you know, after we've been in lockdown and pandemic, which obviously changed the way that maybe we solve problems as well, is that I find that I always wanted to step away and from my desk, and I don't ever find my solutions sat, you know, at a computer. For me, I just don't anymore. Like, I need to be outside, I need to be, you know, walking or doing gardening, I need to be doing something with my hands. This is maybe just a personal thing, but I find my best creative moments or solution, like finding a solution to something, that aha moment comes when I'm maybe doing a new recipe, or I'm just, you know, gone into the cupboard and gone, what could I make for dinner? And then I find something and I go, oh my God, that's the answer to this problem that I've got that's been driving me insane. And now I've found, and I don't know, I think for myself, maybe it's an age thing, but it's just something, stepping away from the normal is actually making me more creative. And I also found that quite, you know, empowering. And I also just wonder, you know, like how you know, people like you will solve problems, you know, and how do you what do you need? What can companies do to equip you with the right skills and spaces and technology to kind of help you find those solutions? That's also just something I was interested in, if you had any thoughts on that.
Well, I was having like a think about it, and sort of like, okay, what would I feel would be like the environment where I feel like I could, be the most productive in a positive way. And I kind of thought about, because I did this internship over the summer, where I had to coach students with two other coaches on archival research, where the objective at the end was that they did a creative output of that, like kind of summed up their research. They chose to do it in the form of a leaflet. And the skills that we had to learn was to, help them along, but also know when to step back so that they could, sort of surprise you with what they come up with. That's something that we really had to learn, was to like not try and hold the hand of the person all the way to the end goal that you see for them, but to kind of give them the tools that they need to let them, really surprise you in what they can create. And I had a session with them where I was tasked with kind of coaching them on the visual design side of what they were going to create. And what I ended up telling them was to, like, because they were struggling with Canva and all these different tools, and they wanted to start with Canva and PowerPoint. But what they wanted to create a leaflet, and that's at the end going to be something physical. So I told them to leave Canva and PowerPoint alone, take an actual piece of paper, fold it in the form that they wanted, try different things, take a pencil, see how things look, and once they've done that physical aspect, then scan that, put that in PowerPoint, Canva, and see where you go from there.
Yeah.
And they ended up like really surprising me in how amazing the output ended up looking like, and how complex the leaflet kind of technical side of it looked like. And then they ended up using Procreate, which I really encourage them to do, because that's what I did for my research poster, and then to do all the design aspects on that, and then kind of rearrange it on PowerPoint. That's less of a hassle. And they ended up doing something so unique and so gorgeous. And I kind of feel like maybe that's a sort of mentality or environment that companies should look at, is like, give the tools, give the piece of paper and the software, and then just let the person fold that piece of paper in all the different ways and options that they can. And I feel like you get to something way more exciting. And if they'd stayed only on Canva, sort of like going through the like set designs that they could come up with, that would have been way less unique, would have not told the same story that they were telling there. And I think that's kind of might be able to be transposed to what we're talking about.
No, definitely. And I think it's that freedom, right, to experiment, to get things wrong, to fail fast, to be like, it's okay, right, and it's all right, and if it goes wrong, you just start again. And I think I've talked about this before, written about it, about some students I work with, obviously hundreds of students at different points in their lives, and it's like some people sometimes it's quicker and sometimes it's slower for other people, and it doesn't mean it's a race. It's just that's just where they are at that moment, and we have to give people time to breathe and to find their way, in a way. Obviously we always need to be productive, but you need to be able to give them those skills and those tools to be able to access that. And so I think that's really important. And I think I was just thinking about, I'm going to move away from job descriptions, but I also wondered what your thoughts might be about company benefits. Like, so years and years ago, you felt like, or after the pandemic, you might think that you've got a job and you've got sick pay, and you're like, oh, that's great, and I get some maternity leave, amazing. And now there's like adoption leave, so for people like me, that was like amazing, and you're like, great. But a benefit to a different person from a different generation, what does a benefit look like to you? The world is like trialing, well, not the whole world, but some companies are trialing a 4-day week, which on one level I think, is that a great idea? We're now doing more flexible working, we do hybrid working. Have you got any thoughts on on benefits, like, and what does a tangible benefit, what does it really feel like to have a benefit, and what would that look like to you?
I don't know if I'm gonna. I hope this is relevant to what you're asking. But I guess the way I'm taking that is to what I feel it might be more relevant to me is like the mental health conversation. Something that I thought for a really long time, especially for how ruthless my experience was in the French system, doing like international baccalaureate option, and sort of like how much work we had, how much pressure I felt like I had on myself. I felt like I I didn't have time to not be okay. Like I genuinely, that was just not in my timetable. I just did not have the time. You go to your teachers, like when you're in those like last 2 years of high school, you tell them, I'm not going to be, I'm not okay. Like I'm really struggling. I can't, like that's not an option. Like your essay is due the next day. Like you hand in that, like, you know what I mean? And I felt like that was only fair of like, I don't have time to not be okay. I don't have time to acknowledge the issues that I'm dealing with. I need to hand in what I have to hand in. I need to achieve what needs to be achieved. I need, and if I wanted to take care of what I was going through or what I was struggling with, that was going to be at the cost of my academics. And that was like a choice that I would have had to make. And one that I saw my friends also to a lot of hardship, and not just myself, of like, that's an active choice you have to make, like of what you're kind of putting first. And going to university, that's when I finally realized, well, that the environment they created for me was that I didn't have to make that choice. I don't know if that's the case, obviously, for all universities, but I think I'm really lucky in the fact that I realized that, I can communicate to my teachers or to my tutors what I'm going through, what is like happening, and they will offer me the support that I need, will give me the time that I need. I'll still produce what needs to be, handed in, but I'll do it in a time where I can do something that I'm proud of without it being at the expense of my well-being. And then also there's like, we have services in place, like the student services, where you can reach out and you'll get like free counseling sessions and things like that. And I think that's something that is so important, because I finally felt like, I don't need to, either be 100% okay to be able to achieve what I want to achieve, or completely ignore the fact that I'm not okay so I can still achieve what I want to achieve. I can not be okay, be working on that, and still achieve things that I'm proud of. And because otherwise you have this sort of like shame thing of like, I just cannot acknowledge what this whole like personal thing going on, because it's irrelevant to what I want to do when it's not at all. And I think that was a hard lesson to learn, because it wasn't something that I had the opportunity to realize until like this year.
Right. Okay. And so, and obviously I'm really, sorry, empathize that, you went through that. And I know that we'd spoken about, your time, doing at the baccalaureate and doing that. And I know that was really, really hard going on you. And obviously you've come through, and I spoke to you a few months ago, and you're obviously on the other side of it, which is great. And so, picking up from that, in a work environment for the future for yourself, are you saying then, to be people, from this generation, they need to be able to open up and own these feelings, right? And how they're actually feeling in their mental well-being, and it be a safe space to do that is like super, super important. And we need to embrace that, which doesn't take away from our productivity, but it just gives us an option, a channel, in order to be able to self-regulate, right, which is super important, and to be able to carry on, but also find a way to get support. And we're not doing this, probably from my parents' generation, of just bottling things up, pushing things down, and just carrying on as normal because that's what we do, right? Are you saying that there's more of a higher awareness of this, and how, absolutely of a necessity to be able to have these kind of spaces and support services in place in a work environment.
Yeah, and I think it kind of links back to when we were talking about empathy. Is like I don't I think there's this misconception that our generation has, you know, there's more like mental health issues in our generation. Well, obviously there's not. It's like what you're saying, like it's just there was not this sort of empathy with ourselves and between each other to be open about it in past generations, which would lead to more burnout, which would lead to more unhappiness. And now there's this push to kind of confront those issues and have that empathy with each other and with ourselves. I think it's especially with ourselves because I think at least how I felt is like this fear of like, okay, if I say that I'm struggling with what I'm struggling with, then people are not going to think I'm capable of doing the things that I want to do, and they're not going to give me the opportunities that I want. So I can't say I'm going through what I'm going through. But if there's a proof of empathy existing without it, putting in question your capability of doing what you're able to do. Exactly. I think if there's that sort of environment created in companies, that would be to the benefit of everyone involved.
Yeah. So you're kind of taking away that fear of judgment, and fear of being shamed, fear of it taking, from, any future promotions. How is that person then going to be able to cope if we give them more responsibility? They're just not able to do it, and you want to take all of that away and just be able to be yourself, right? Bring your whole self, be yourself. And sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down, sometimes you're in the middle, but you just need to be able to be honest, right? And so honesty, empathy, and this I guess this freedom to express ourselves is a good kind of roundup. These are the three core skills that we think will make the next generation of workers, whatever that might look like, be a more a good, happy, productive workforce, which is we're all still going to be working, hopefully, and the bots and the robots won't have taken over. But by 2050, apparently the research is saying is that the whole world of work is going to look remarkably different. A lot of the jobs that we're doing now will be transformed. We're already seeing that, with a lot of the tech giants like doing different things. And you go into a supermarket, or I went into a restaurant the other day, and normally I'd go and order at the counter, and now there's like a computer, and then you do it, and then I always have 10 million problems getting to that, and then I always have to ask someone for help, and then I'm like, oh, why can't I just have that human experience? I'm just of this generation where I really love the social interaction, the human experience, people asking, how's your day? How are you today? I think I'll quite miss that if that changes, but maybe there will be robots with empathy, who knows? That'll be delivering your mail in a different way. I don't know. But yeah, I think yeah, exactly. And so my last question would be, what are your hopes and dreams? I know that's a big one.
Well, I think that's something that I'm trying obviously to still figure out, and I think there's probably not a time where we maybe have figured it out. But I guess it is to come back to the very beginning, is to like follow my gut. I know that I want to creative direct, like that's what I thrive the most in. That's what I've always loved doing. That's what I've always managed to do in whatever form it's taken. All the time. And so I want to do that, and I have no idea where it's going to take me. I mean, I started when I was 11. I was like, oh, I really want to make movies. And then now I'm, doing English at film at St. Andrews. I don't know what sort of movies I would like to make or how or whatever, but I'm just trying to dip my toes in everything, experiment, and see where it leads me. And I think my hope and dream is to have undone the damage of what I thought success was for a very long time, and what I was taught success was, to actually just be, happy and motivated with just doing what feels like right now. And I guess that that's the main one. And to just finish on what you were mentioning as well about, you know, the future looking like bots sort of taking over all these jobs, I think that's also why it's so important that this line between art and science is blurred, because I think that's probably our only way to make sure that we're not unhappy in that world, is that if we're still using technology in tandem always with creativity and letting those two worlds kind of like melt into each other, I think we're bound to still find ways to be, you know, happily producing and creating.
Yeah, I absolutely second that. And you know, I've got young kids, and you know, I'm from this creative background, and you know, very different kind of like squiggly kind of career, and then I end up, you know, working for a data consultancy, and I'm like, wow, how did that happen? And having to reinvent myself and find my way in technology has been a really steep learning curve, but really enjoyable. And what I say to my kids, you know, is that if you put yourself right in the heartbeat of what's going on, it's less scary. So for someone like me that does find it a bit scary, but I constantly making myself feel comfortable being uncomfortable, that's also a massive like skill. It's almost like a treat that I've given myself permission to do that, because I used to just be uncomfortable and then hate it, thinking, oh, I just haven't got it right. And I've given myself permission. That's okay. It's all right. And now I'm more happy being uncomfortable, because I'm just like, this is what the futures are going to feel like. I just better get on with the program really, and just be okay with it, because just, you know, got to keep stretching yourself and not be scared of stuff. But if I keep putting myself in the middle of it, and then I'll keep learning. And like I said about pace, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. It's okay. It's not a race, right? We just want to be happy, enjoying it, you know. And so, yeah, I'll just finish on that. And I think it's been wonderful having you with me.